you.
Thank you.
Hi y'all, my name's Ram. I use he, him pronouns. I am a sophomore at Swarthmore College. I'm studying peace and conflict studies, education, and medical anthropology. And I'm the vice president of the Queer Union here, and I'm happy to join you all today.
We appreciate that. Who would like to be next?
Hi, I'm Tristan. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm a trans man, an NCC grad, an activist. I'm president of the local PFLAG chapter. Yeah, it's great to be here.
Thank you so very much.
And I'm Megan. Like I said, this is my final semester here at NCC. I'm an English major, and I'm really excited to be here too. I'm really excited that we were able to do this. I think conversations like this are really hard and important, especially after the last couple of years. So thank you all for coming. And I'm just really excited to see what kind of conversation we have today. Just so you guys know, we will be recording. It won't be made public or anything. It's just for us on PTK. We use the data for further and for our projects that we do throughout the semester, but it won't be released publicly to anyone. So please feel free to be honest and candid about anything you wish today.
I also want to recognize PTK and their advisors for sponsoring, their members and their advisors for sponsoring this event. We appreciate you all having these very important dialogue with your fellow students. So thank you, PTK and advisors. Does advisors want to say anything?
I just want to say thank you so much, everyone, for coming today. I'm really, I have to say, I'm so impressed with all the hard work our PTK members have done over the past 2 semesters to put together the series of panel discussions to really open up opportunities for all of you to openly discuss different viewpoints at the college that we really think need to be heard and shared.
I agree. This is Sonia Massey, one of the advisors. And I just want to say I am so proud of our PTK Beta Beta Chi students. And I applaud you for your bravery for this session in particular. And just bravo to our panelists. And I hope that everyone feels comfortable in this space to be their authentic selves.
It goes without saying that we're going to follow the old Vegas rules, which whatever is said here stays here, right? And so let's begin. Dear panel, tell us about your confidence and your self-awareness journey, hoping that this would be the spark that would have other people realize their own sense of journey. So please tell us about your self-awareness journey. Who would like to be first?
I'll start off, I guess. So for me, my self-awareness journey has been pretty much my entire life. I always knew, like, ever since I was little, I was kind of obsessed with women. Not obsessed, but I always knew, like, it was never a question. Like, as soon as I really understood what sexuality was in middle school and that there were things besides heterosexuality, I was like, oh, that's me. So it's been almost 12 years now, and through those 12 years, it's not so much that changes, it's what I know about myself that changes. Like in a couple of our meetings prior to this, we discussed the whole concept of how many letters of the alphabet have you been? Because the more you learn about yourself, the more comfortable you are with labels. It's not that my identity itself has changed, it's just what I knew about myself at the time. You know, I've thought everything from bisexual, asexual, pansexual. I'm currently identifying as queer, and it doesn't really matter though, is something that I'm coming to terms with, whatever letter you do choose. it's whatever makes you happy, really. Just be mindful of the implications and don't try not to give false information in regards to it. So I think what I'm trying to say is that it's kind of a lifelong experience. You never sometimes you might never know. That's why we have so many people now that it's a safer environment coming out in their 50s and their 60s. And that's because sometimes it takes your whole life to figure out who you are.
Thank you. To thy own self be true, right? Who else would like to share?
I can go next. So I think, yeah, I definitely resonate a lot with what you just said, Megan. I think for me, I have a somewhat similar experience. It definitely was something that I think I always knew. Like, I remember being like in like kindergarten and being like, oh, like I think that boy's cute. And but I think it really kind of like shifted. I think I tried at least like in early junior high, just because like the societal pressures, right? Like all the other kids were like having girlfriends and like being in relationships. So I like went along with some of that at first, but it never really felt genuine. And so I think I think I really started identifying as gay like pretty early on. Like I think like my last year of junior high was when I really started coming to terms with it. And I actually told my parents in like 7th grade. And it was like such a nerve-wracking experience because I was like what, like 12 or 13 at the time. So I think, I mean, reflecting on that, it took a lot of like emotional awareness on my part to be even feel like comfortable telling my parents at such an early age. But they were pretty accepting. So I'm really grateful for that. And then I think after that, really, I just started kind of like being more accepting of myself and starting being more open about it with other people. But I definitely was something that I knew from like as young as I can remember.
Thank you so very much for sharing, Ray. Who would like to be next?
I'll go. I can also really relate to that. My first crush was on my best friend, who was a girl in it's probably 6th grade, and I didn't realize what it was at the time. Um, and I, as I got older, I kind of put the pieces together and realized way in after effect that my first crush was my best friend. I didn't even like recognize it at the time. And I was just kind of following the whole like, oh, you're supposed to like boys. Oh, this boy likes you. Do you like him? Da 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 da. And then when I would have to say somewhere around my sophomore year, I started realizing that I was different. And then when I left home at 16, I was able to explore it a little bit more freely, which was very beneficial to me at a young age because I was able to have conversations with myself and with other people more openly without worrying about the ramifications of it. And at the time, pansexual didn't exist. You were either lesbian, gay, or bi. So I identified as bi. It wasn't until adulthood when I identified the fact that the physical aspects of attraction didn't really make sense to me. And I'm more interested in the character of an individual than the body in which they reside. So that's when I started, Googling. I discovered my sexuality via Google. And pansexual was the most accurate way I could describe it. And it's very, it's kind of freeing to get a word for it because you're always questioning. But yeah, that's about where I am right now.
Thank you so very much. And the power of Google, we getting that today. Tristan.
So my self-discovery journey has been long and complicated. Megan's comment about how many letters have you been really resonates with me. I came out as bisexual to my parents like 12 years ago when I was like 14. I identified as a lesbian for a really long time. I married a woman, then I came out as trans, and now I have a boyfriend. So life is complicated. somebody also said in the chat about discovering it on Tumblr, and Tumblr is how I found out that trans men even existed. For a very long time, I thought that you could only transition one way, which led to a very complicated belief within myself that my parents had had sex reassignment surgery performed on me as an infant, and that's why I was trans. So yeah, like lack of representation for trans men made things really complicated for me trying to understand myself. So yeah, that's pretty much like my journey with learning who I am.
Thank you so very much, everyone, for sharing. Just some housekeeping notes. There is a form, a survey that is in the chat. And if you just came in, please click that and participate on that. It'd be really great. We have a few questions, but if you have any other question that you would really love for me to ask, just put it in the chat and I'm gonna balance that out with the ones that we already have prepared. How does the history of LGBTQIA plus activism affected us in the present day? How is that affecting you in the present day? Who would like to be first? Megan, would you like to be first?
I guess I'll kick this start off. I think it obviously impacts all of us, and I think it's really important because a lot of people don't really know a lot of the history of it. I've met a lot of people in the LGBTQ community that don't even know about the Stonewall riots. I didn't know about them until I was older, and it's really sad and kind of depressing that people are so unaware of our history because we're not taught it. If you don't know to look for something, you're not going to learn about it. Exactly where I'm going with this. In case you don't know, LGBTQIA plus activism began in the 60s, 70s at the Stonewall Bar, where Marsha P. Johnson, a Black trans woman, threw bricks at police officers. So right off the bat, like the history of LGBTQIA plus activism coincides with Black Lives Matter off the beginning. There's a strong interculturalization that comes with oppressed groups. And it's always shocking the way people act as if you can't be both.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. The Stonewall Rise was a pivotal point in American history. I think last year was the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall Riots, and so, but it is a generational thing that people may not be aware of. Some people came into the movement now without even knowing about those other people. So,
or even just like the long-lasting impact the AIDS epidemic has had on the community. That's something I've seen AIDS documentaries, but I still lose concept of how devastating it was in the community. And it really shows in generational concepts. You know, there are so many older generations that are like, well, we didn't have those people in our day. And that's because a lot of them died.
yes, a lot of people don't remember this, but they initially were calling AIDS GRID, right? And so that stigma is just like the same way of calling Corona the China virus, right? They used to call AIDS the GRID.
Even before
virus.
It was GRID, it was called gay cancer.
Gay cancer, right? So
Yeah.
These words and how they lump it into certain groups have become part of American economy. And it took almost, I don't know how long before Reagan even said the word AIDS. And so this was a very, if you ever watched Angels in America, right? The great film about it is incredible. Who else would like to share? Anyone else like to talk about how they feel about the history that they are part of?
Yeah. So I've been involved in activism for a really long time, and luckily for me, that means that I've been exposed to older LGBTQIA people who have been able to relay their experiences to me. And I really agree with what Megan was saying about how, as a group, we don't know a lot about our own culture and we don't know a lot about our own history. I was talking to a friend last night about how he works in a high school, and he was talking about how the younger LGBTQ people he knows don't have the same desires to live in gay neighborhoods the way that people my age and older do. And that generational divide also contributes to our lack of knowledge, and it's just a self-perpetuating cycle.
Yeah, I think I agree with like a lot of what has already been said. I think one thing that I think about a lot is the history, like the local history. And I think for me, so I go to Swarthmore, and my experience at Swarthmore thus far, right? It's been pretty accepting. It's a pretty accepting school. I think our career union has like, I don't know, like 100 or so members, and that for me is crazy. But I like the fact that we have so many people out and about that are really accepting of themselves and they're comfortable being open about it. But that makes me think of, you know, like for here at Swarthmore, the previous generations of Swarthmore students who did a lot of activism during the 60s and 70s to get the queer union established, to really like demand like accountability from the institution. And I think in terms of like the AIDS epidemic that Megan mentioned, I think one thing that comes to mind is I feel comfortable sharing this. So I went on like I went on prep, and like I to be able to like be healthier in my own sexual life. And I think like a lot of what comes to mind is like the history of all the people that came, all the gay people, all the gay men, of the LGBTQ community that came before me, that fought to make like to bring these things to the national spotlight and to increase accessibility for us to be able to get medication to prevent these diseases and also to reduce the stigma. And so like those are some of the ways that like our present experiences are intertwined with the past of our community members.
Yeah, it's remarkable. You can see a commercial today about person living with AIDS as if they were talking about diabetes or anything else. It's just a normal pill that is sold. And years ago, it was a terrible stigma to it. So I think there is, because of the sacrifice of so many, not because of just time, but the price that were paid by so many to make these things so very important. Jessica, do you want to comment on this? You can if you would like.
Sorry. I can come at it from like a different side. I am one of the people who was very ignorant of our culture and its history. Being I kind of had to go through it on my own. I didn't have anyone, any mentors or anyone that I knew that was LGBTQIA. So anything I learned, I had to look for. And if you don't, type in the word Stonewall, it's not going to come up. You're not going to find it. So a lot of what I've learned about the culture and its history, I learned at NCC in my 4 years here, by speaking to 20-something-year-olds. And because I was so isolated and they have this access to information and they have more support groups, they're getting the information before I am. And I'm not that much older. I'm only 34. But just that's enough years to put a divide in there where if you don't have someone in your life older than you or who, if there's a chain of information, you're not going to get it. So that's kind of, I am realizing I'm still educating myself on the sacrifices of those who came before me, and I'm very humbled by it.
Well, thank you all for that. And I think, as important as history is also important about today, right? About different laws that are being passed and laws that should be passed. So we should always be engaged and informed about policies that are impacting your community and communities of other people, right? We should care about that. Moving on to our next question. What are the differences in having a dome experience versus not? Does living away from home allow someone to explore their gender or sexuality? And who would like to be first on that question?
I can start this one. So I think so. I'm from South Texas. I live like 5 minutes away from the southern border. So coming away like Pennsylvania is super far, right? So I think for me, like having the opportunity to come all the way here and have a dorm to myself, right? Like don't get me wrong, I think I love my community back home and I miss them all the time. I miss my family and my siblings. But I think for me, like having the opportunity to really exist like by myself without like any of the other people back home like really being able to like not judge me. I don't want to say that, but like just having the opportunity to exist away from home where I'm a lot more independent, where I have my own room, I have my own space. I think that for me has definitely allowed me to really explore myself and really find who I am and really be able to just like find myself and be able to explore things that I wouldn't have otherwise tried to do or gone into had I stayed home rather.
Thank you for sharing. Who else would like to talk about this? Who'd like to be next?
I have a couple kind of takes from that question. As I said previously, I did leave home early. I was 16 when I left, and that did allow me to have some freedom in exploring myself. So I did have a girlfriend at an early age, and there was no one to answer to, which was nice because I got to basically explore it without, it was a safe space for me. When I became an adult, I discovered that if I was out, I would be unicorn hunted. I would be hypersexualized. I would be assumed to be a slut, quote unquote. So I started hiding it. And I started not paying attention to it. I just started dating guys and you know, not pursuing who I wanted to. And when that got to be too much, and I basically surrounded myself with a community that if they had known, I would have been ostracized. So I enlisted in the military at a time where don't ask, don't tell was still a thing. And then I was placed in a bay with 60 other women. And I was not the only LGBTQ person in that 60, but we didn't talk about it. We, you know, there was a few where, you know, you kind of look at each other and there'd be like a slight nod and then like a questioning, but we never verbalized it. And because you didn't know who you could trust. You didn't know who was going to tell the drill sergeant, who was going to try to get you dishonorably discharged, because it was a very competitive atmosphere. And then actually when I was in holdover, one of the people who was in holdover with me, she was being kicked out for engaging in acts with another girl. And it was scary. It was very scary. Because your life could be very, very much altered by just loving someone. But now, as I'm out of that situation and I'm coming into my own, this is actually my largest, like, biggest shout it from the rooftops out moment. So it's taken a lot to come to this point.
Thank you for sharing. I know these are very emotional topics for all our panelists, and we appreciate them opening themselves up to these kind of questions. Who else would like to comment on this? Yes, Rebecca, please.
So sorry if you hear my brother in the background, but in my house, it's not really like a topic that is ever brought up. In the chat, I said like both of my parents, they're from other countries, and in those countries, it wasn't really a thing that you were even allowed to express. It was literally punishable by law over there. So coming here, it's a whole different world for them. And this is not to say that they're of the type to think that way, but they are still kind of figuring it out themselves, what this is all about, because it was never a topic over there. It just didn't happen. So it's kind of like a getting used to thing. And I'm not out myself. I appear straight to people. I have a boyfriend. It's you don't question it. But people that I am close to, they are fully aware that I identify as non-binary. They are fully aware that to me, how I look is pretty much just my body is just a vessel for my mind. I am what's up here, not how I present to the world. How I present to the world is merely just a form of expression. So I think to kind of be so in a home life that is so different from my outside life, like something like this, or the community that I'm a part of, or the friends that I am with, it's a weird dichotomy to kind of jump around from one person to from being one person to another. And hopefully one day I'll be able to kind of come clean and say that. But for right now, I'm fine with that being kind of hidden, because to me, non-binary just means to me to just be myself, no matter what label is put on an item of clothing, or how I act, how I talk, how I present to people. So I don't really see that as something that I have to come out for, but I definitely, you know, kind of alongside Megan's story, how I was in third grade or something like that, and I'm being like, wow, all these girls are extremely pretty. What's going on? You know, and kind of discovering that there's a label for that, but discovering it on Instagram and discovering it on Tumblr, which, you know, is a great educational site. That was sarcasm. So it's been a strange journey of discovering it through, you know, the internet as a young little child in middle school.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I know that's a lot personally. Appreciate it. I'm gonna Google what Tumblr is later. But it is very important for us to pause for a moment to realize that there are a lot of people who home situation is so desperate that they become homeless because of their families does not support them. It was very beautiful when Ram was talking about that his parents supported him and how they made him feel, and that is a beautiful thing. But for there are people who are homeless. There's a significant number of LGBTQ plus people who are homeless because of that lack of support, and that is something that we must think about.
To piggyback
Kristen.
on what Dr. Robinson said there, roughly 40% of homeless minors identify as LGBTQ. It's a massive problem, and we only make up under 10% of the population. So it's just incredibly disproportionate.
It really is. I'm gonna drift off the common question just to ask this question: what can we do as a college, as an institution? A lot of times people find themselves in college, or not find themselves, but have the courage or the timing to be more open about their identity, and what as an institution we can do to support students in helping that transition.
I'll start by kind of listing off some of the things that helped me kind of refine my sexuality while at NCC and kind of come to terms and comfortable with being out. NCC has created a campus-wide safe space. There is not a single professor on campus that I would feel like I couldn't say this to. I'm pansexual. And I think that in itself is such a resource. If there were more activities like this, I think that would be very helpful. Or if there was counseling specifically for, you know, helping someone come out, maybe acting as a mediator for these difficult conversations. If, you know, we definitely don't want to put anyone in any kind of danger, but if you could have someone practice or have someone that's available to, you know, kind of pick up the pieces if it doesn't go very well. I think that could be very helpful to some students. We had a lot of students who wanted to participate in this, but didn't because they're not out at home. It's because they didn't feel comfortable talking about it on a Zoom meeting where they might be overheard. So it's, I think, getting that kind of space where they could say it out loud for the first time. Sometimes that helps just kind of put it in perspective so they can try it on for size. And I think if counseling did something like an event where they advertised that, or, said, we're doing this if you'd like to come, I think that would be nice.
At my previous institution, our LGBT club with Spectrum, they would have a door, and they would have an event and cake and stuff, and people would come through the door, right? And people would celebrate them. So it was literally a coming out. But that takes a lot of courage too, for someone to be willing to do that in a crowd of people. And that may not be a situation that people can be in. So we're looking for ways. I think you're right, having these discussions, having them in a lot of forums where people can get a chance to go to, and away from their parents to have those discussions are so very important. Anyone else would like to think about resources that could be beneficial?
I think even like making sure that issues that affect the LGBTQIA plus community are in the curriculum. I can't say for every class, obviously, but I know outside of my English classes and like the classes I've taken that discuss it, there wasn't a lot of discussion on it. I mean, it briefly came up in my ancient civilizations class, but do we cover it in all of our history classes? In our US history classes, do we cover the history of Stonewall? Do we cover the aftermath of the AIDS epidemic in full? Do we just briefly talk about it and move on?
Yeah, I think adding on to that, I agree with everything you just said, Megan. I think two things come to mind. I think the first one would be, and this kind of has I think this is a question later on, but I'll briefly touch upon it. In terms of like LGBTQIA representation, right? I think like a lot of our curriculum, and this is not like I think just in general public education, like a lot of our curriculum is very like whitewashed, and it doesn't represent yeah, like we have queer writers, we have queer actors, we have queer history, we have queer literature, right? So like I think one thing is making sure that those voices are represented in the curriculum, so that when we have queer students, they're able to see, oh look, like like there's a queer writer that I want to be a writer, and I see that and it inspires me, right? So that's one thing. And I think the second thing that comes to mind would be to make sure that like in the spaces that are available, to make sure that the institution reaches out to or includes queer voices in the spaces that decisions are being made, right? Because I think oftentimes, and this is like not at anyone specifically, but I think oftentimes like institutions tend to act like they know what's best for the students, and that's not always the case. So I think making sure that queer students are at in the table making decisions along with like faculty and staff, or where possible, that's another thing that I think an institution can do to help.
I would like to
Rebecca.
see.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Okay. Go ahead, Trishan. I'm gonna get Rebecca next.
I would like to see the college provide information to students regarding like the legal needs of trans students, provide information about how to acquire name changes, provide information about how to change your gender marker on your state ID. I know a lot of that is county specific, but at minimum, we could be providing that information for Monroe and Northampton counties.
Well, I would say that the club here, our club here did that. They had a representative to come in to talk about that, and it was a club that was a community agency that would assist people. And so I thought I commend our club here that was part of that. Rebecca, you had your hand up. I'm sorry.
So everybody made like excellent points, especially you, Tristan, with saying like, where do I go for this, that, and the other? I think I've kind of sound like a broken record at this point to Dr. Robinson, especially because I'm always like, what are my resources? Where do I go to find that? When I go on my NCC or Workday or in the building, I don't know where I'm going to go. God forbid something happened to me in this kind of, because of something like this. I don't know where I can go. Yes, I can Google it, it's free, but what if my college has something that's even better, that's free, that is provided to me, that I can utilize and is actually safer? even just kind of an email that we can access and email somebody anonymously without anybody hearing us or anybody judging us. That would help oodles. And I know, like, in my little tiny high school that I went to, we had a gay straight alliance club for maybe 2 months, and that was it. And I'm scared of that happening to other places. Not saying that that's going to happen here, because we're having panels like this and stuff like that, but it needs to be more consistent so that anybody who comes in or leaves can take it with them, because sometimes you never know what's going to happen to you. One day you're going to end up homeless because you are of this community. And where am I going to go for help? I didn't even know where Family Promise was, and it's not even 10 minutes away from me. So just more resources and more knowledge about it, even if it's just like in a student newsletter or something like that, and just harp on it constantly, because not everybody looks at their emails, but if it's enough like thrown at you, maybe somebody can pay attention and help somebody out with it.
I do have a suggestion.
Please.
I kind of thought of it just now. We were talking about having representation, and I know that there was recently an art exhibition online, a digital one, and then there's also the Laconic. We could definitely have themed, distribution of students who are LGBTQIA, give them a voice. And I think it'd be interesting to see what they have to say, or show us, and then kind of throw onto the idea that in the curriculums, there's not a lot touched on it. I'm in a medical curriculum. I'm in the dental hygiene program. So for me, I actually have a theme this year with all of my projects, and it is the LGBTQIA community. I just did a hypothetical outline for a community program where dental providers and practitioners would receive continuing education courses on inclusivity and LGBTQIA cultural competency, because that's actually very important in the medical field. Someone who's receiving hormone replacement therapy, there are oral side effects. And me as a dental hygienist, that would actually be my thing to treat. And unfortunately, I think so far I've tallied it up, I've received 1.5 hours of education, and that's not enough. I did a lit review on the oral side effects of hormone replacement therapy, and I couldn't fit how much information there was in the pages required for the project. And I think if we look at it from a needs perspective, so in the medical field, in my field, needs rely on health. It's all has to do with health, any kind of socioeconomic status that could, affect the access to care. Well, you start talking about that, then you're into sociology. And there's other subjects where that touches upon. And I really think that there is a place in every subject for LGBTQIA. So I think it should be mentioned in everything, because there might be a student in that class, and therefore they're involved. So if it's a STEM, you could talk about how, maybe touch on the fact that, STEM isn't exactly going to be the most accepting fields in some ways. So that might be some kind of curriculum point that could be added. They mentioned English. Sorry, it's like outside of my realm, but we're in every aspect of the life that we all live and want to, every job that we want to have, there is an LGBTQIA person in that job right now. So I think we really need to include it more into the curriculum and relate it to it. Yeah, kind of rambled a bit there, but.
No, not at all. We have a strategic diversity plan as an institution, and part of that strategic diversity plan has curriculum that's supposed to be incorporated in diversity, but we're trying to get that there. And sometimes we're there and we don't know we're there. When I was reading Baldwin, I just thought Baldwin was upset about just feeling isolated for being Black, right? I didn't know that he was feeling isolated for being Black and being gay, right? Because he was isolated from two worlds, right? When you hear about Baldwin or Langston Hughes, which I love Langston so much, I named my son Langston. So I mean, there are a lot of intersectionality with writers, but a lot of times you don't know about these people. You don't know that side of their narrative, right? And so that's important to know that side of their narrative to have a great understanding. Megan, you was about to say something.
I was going to go off of kind of what you're saying. I took honors African American literature here, and that's one of the classes I'm talking about. We did not really cover the LGBTQIA plus aspect of some of these writers. If it came up briefly, and I love that class. It's my favorite class that I've taken here, but it could have been better. We even when we talked about the Harlem Renaissance and singers, I found out later on that, what's her name? Betsy?
Oh, Betsy, yeah, she was
bisexual, and I
yeah,
didn't
she was
know
out.
that.
She was very out. Yes.
I didn't know that. I did a presentation on her and found out later on that she was bisexual. And it's those little things that could make or break it. In my intro to psychology class, we skipped chapter 4 on gender identity. It's those little things that, like, you wouldn't notice. Those little things that you don't notice unless you're looking for.
Yes. They should have definitely covered Baldwin in that class. I can tell you that for sure. That was a miscarriage of justice.
I think it was like a sentence about it, but it obviously didn't stick because I forgot until you mentioned it. And I also love Alec. I love Baldwin as well. So
yeah, James Baldwin is amazing.
James Baldwin's great. I almost said Alec Baldwin. Ignore me.
That's the only reason I didn't name my son Baldwin, because of that.
Exactly. Everyone would have thought that.
Who's Rebecca? You had your hand up, and then Trisha.
It's also kind of just how you were saying in your African American literature class or any of the other specialized classes. Someone's experience as a this race person is not near the experience of somebody of a different race, of a different social class or anything like that, of their own LGBTQIA plus experience. So the fact that we just kind of group it all into one, like, this is the experience we all have, yay. No, we need to, like, be aware and, touch on the fact that not everybody is going to have the same experience, because there are so many factors that are going to change it. The stigma in certain communities, especially in religious communities and stuff like that. So the fact that we just kind of glaze over it in classes that are supposedly like the diversity classes or anything like that, the fact that you don't touch on those sorts of experiences when it makes up a large part of people's lives and how they go through life being an LGBTQIA plus person, the fact that we don't touch on the fact that it affects these people so much more than it would affect someone who looks like me, yeah, you're canceling out a whole group of people and a whole group of experiences that need to be brought to light and need to be heard.
Yes. Let's see, can we move to a fresh new question? Let's see what we got here. How does the LGBTQIA plus identity shift from high school to college to adulthood? Who would like to be first?
I'll kind of touch on that first. So like I said earlier, pansexual didn't exist when I was younger. I thought I was bi, and I just kind of went with that. As I got older, still assuming I'm bi, it was more of my identity then, because I was striving so hard to make sense of it. And I was just like holding on to bi like it was some kind of like rope. So I was like, okay, I'm this. It's okay, I'm this. And as I, went through that phase where I kind of had to hide it, it became less important to me, because I had to make it less important to me for my own, what I felt perceived as my safety. now it's less of my identity. I'm very comfortable with it, but like I don't walk around with that as one of my key identifiers. I identify much more strongly with other things that affect my life much more frequently. My sexuality, because I am in what appears to be a heteronormative relationship, it's not a factor in my day-to-day. If I was currently with someone of a different gender or who presented differently, then it might be more of an identifier because it would be something that I would constantly have to represent. But as I am now, it's not like right up front and center. But that's actually a good thing because that is telling me that right now I'm not fighting to be myself. So it's not as important for me to wear it like as like some kind of badge or like to like hold it up there and be like, this is me, because I know it's me. And anyone who is close to me knows it's me. And it's not really something that comes up in discussion a lot unless it's relevant. But I perceive that as a good thing. That to me is a sign of the progress because I don't have to identify so strongly with something that is really settled to me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. Who would like to discuss that transition? Kristen.
So I actually live my life very differently from that. I say that I live my life aggressively gay. I live every day of my life out. Huge portions of my life are dedicated to activism. For me personally, I find freedom in being allowed to be aggressively gay every single day of my life. Because I've always been in relationships that present as queer, and especially with my experience transitioning and being out as trans for 2 years before I started hormones, I often feel as though I have no choice but to fight for being acknowledged for who I am. But I also recognize that because I have the privilege of being white and college educated, my ability to be out like that is a lot simpler than it is for other people. So I choose to use my privilege that way to make things safer for other people. I am that person who will annoyingly go to management at my job and tell them that someone else isn't being treated right based on their queer identity. And I will do that to the point where my management is like, please just go away. So I think that it both can be freeing, and I think it's more about like what personal experience best applies to your life.
It goes without saying that there are so many young people, particularly in high school, middle school, and the suicide rates and the level of depression are so high for the population. And so it's another thing we just have to be thinking about and those experiences that other people are having. Did anyone else would like to talk about their experience from high school to college? Oh yes, okay, Rebecca.
Mine was a little odd because I kind of knew from a younger age, but also my sort of high school, middle school experience was not very diverse. The school I was in, it was from 6th to 12th grade, all in one building, and there were 100 students, the whole school. Not a lot of diversity there. So I didn't know. I didn't know a lot. I had to go out of my way and figure that all out because it wasn't taught in my school. Again, we had a gay straight alliance for 2 months. In all 7 years that I was there, I attended it for 2 months, and that's as long as it existed. So kind of going from a place like that to being in a panel and participating in something like this in college, it's a much like relieving experience to know that I can go somewhere and say my piece and have other people say, yeah, I understand you. So not that I wasn't so much not understood in that other school, it just didn't feel like it was some place where, this kind of thing would happen. And because it really didn't. it's getting better, but you know, there's not really much you can do with 100 students under one roof. So it feels a lot more freeing and a lot more relieving and a lot more informational being in the college setting versus my tiny high school.
Thank you.
Jump in for a hot second and ask
Please.
if I could cut in. Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to see everybody. I actually have to hop off at 5, but there's 2 quick announcements I wanted to throw in. One is Sonia Massey and I had the pleasure of meeting Reverend Brandon Robertson, which is 2 weeks ago as part of Dave's service. And he is the new faith minister for the Bradbury Sullivan Center in Allentown. He's wonderful. If you have TikTok, definitely follow him because he's awesome. I didn't realize I was following him, and I told him I was following a TikTok celebrity and was now meeting him on Zoom. One of the things he encouraged everybody to do, especially when we talk about activism, is we're really trying to push for the Equality Act. And unfortunately, Toomey's office has not been very supportive of it, and they've been getting a lot of pushback from conservative or Christian groups. So I am going to put his information in the chat, how you can contact Toomey's office, say you're in if you're in support of the act. You can certainly look up more stuff online about it. It's important for those in this community to get this passed for so many reasons. But make sure, and if you have any other questions, we can certainly give you some more resources. But that's the information to send to Toomey's office, since that is our state representative for this area. So please feel free. And Reverend Brandon was lovely, so we'll try to incorporate him in the future for other things with Bradbury Sullivan. On a happier note, before I have to depart for another meeting, but on April 29th at 6 p.m., Student Life is welcoming Miss Kasha Davis from RuPaul's Drag Race for Drag Queen Bingo. I see lots of happy people here. So I will put in the chat how you can sign up. We'll have lots of prizes. It's kind of our last big event for the school year. And she's going to be telling jokes, and it's going to be a good time. And Ram, I know you're sophomore, but you can come too. Everybody's welcome. So I will put that in the chat, so feel free to come by and hang out. So if you have any other questions, let me know. But thank you for letting me kind of drop in the middle of this. I will put that link right now. Tell your friends. We have lots of prizes. It's going to be a fun evening on April 29th at 6.
Thank you, Fran. Thank you for that and everything else you do for us. Great programming, always. Such great programming. I'm jealous every time I miss something. I'm like, I missed out on that. And so really great. As the time is getting a little late, I want to make sure that anyone else in the audience would like to ask a question for the group, we get a chance to talk about their thoughts. Does anyone in the group would like to ask a question to the panelists?
Ram had something to say from the last question. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I wanted to skip him.
Oh, please, Ram.
No, you're good. You're good. You're good. Y'all.
No, please. We have time. Please go ahead.
Let me see. What was the question again? Because I don't
It was about the transition from high school to college to adulthood.
Yeah. I think, like, just to be brief, I think in my experience, like, we didn't have anything queer related in high school. It's Texas, so it's like it's a little more conservative. But I think, yeah, like, definitely, like, as I transition to college, like, the fact that I'm even the vice president of a queer union right now, mind blowing to me. Coming from coming from Texas specifically. But it's definitely pretty freeing. To be able to, like, go from never talking about being queer and never really acknowledging that, to now being pretty involved in, like, queer activism and organizing events for the queer folks here and stuff like that, and getting to know other queer folks at other institutions like you all. So yeah, that's all I have to say.
Thank you for sharing that. We would have missed out on that. I'm sorry. That's my bad. I want to get some questions from the group if anyone would like to say something to this extinguished and wonderful panel.
I have a question, and I'm going to throw this out. So my daughter came out probably, I want to say it was on 8th or 9th grade, and we are very open about it in the house and within our family. Where I struggle is I'm the in-between person between her and her grandparents who are in their mid 80s, because they're very old school, very traditional. Their views are not going to change. I can tell you that their views aren't going to change. My daughter rolls off her shoulders like water. It really does. Like I admire her because she literally can just let it roll off. But for me, I feel like I want to try to bridge that gap better, especially, because they're our parents. But I don't know how to get people that are in their mid 80s that are very, very set in their ways to understand um, the whole LGBTQIA, concept. For lack of a better description, I'm not doing a good way of describing it, but like, just to give you an example, my mother is first generation South Korean that came here, and very, very Catholic, and we're so totally opposite. But she, when she found out that my daughter was gay, she absolutely, like, literally was coming up to her. She's hearing impaired too, so she's a sign language, but was literally coming up and crossing her and saying that she was going to pray for her and pray for the demons to come out of her body and make sure she was going to be okay. And my daughter has the understanding, like, we both can understand she means it sincerely because she cares about her granddaughter. She doesn't understand gay. Like, she just doesn't understand that. So if anybody has suggestions on how to help bridge that gap, that's an area where I struggle, and I've never been able to put that together.
Tristan?
So I'm president of the Northeast Pennsylvania PFLAG chapter. That's Parents, Friends, and Family of Lesbians and Gays. If you would like, I can message you my email address and I can help connect you with other people who are in similar situations. A big part of what PFLAG does is it connects families, and our mission statement is that we keep families together. So I can absolutely help connect you with people who will be in similar situations to you and well equipped to help you with those things.
Thank you so very much. Ram, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was gonna say because you mentioned like the religious aspect of it, and I took a religion class in my first semester here that was life-changing, and I read this book and actually it wasn't for that class, that unrelated, but I read this book called God and the Gay Christian. So I think maybe something that I would suggest would be for you to try to read up on like queer theology, so that you can find ways to like articulate like that aspect of it, and that might help your parents understand that if you speak to them more like on their own terms, right? Because you mentioned they're very religious, so I think yeah, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, communicating in the language of another person always kind of makes things simpler, right? Does anyone else would like to say something? Oh, I'm sorry, just.
I'm going to kind of start with the reason I left home at 16 is because my dad tried to perform an exorcism on me. So I don't really like to talk about it because it was pretty traumatizing. I was tied down and everything. But I totally agree with what Ram is saying, to use the language that they speak. With my family, we had that period of where there was no communication. And I think that might have helped them put some things in perspective. Now, as an adult, I have a good relationship with them. They've all written out apologies to me that they wrote with their pastor. And, they changed churches. They went from Catholicism to, they actually changed to, I believe they're non-denominational now. But they wrote letters with their pastor to me apologizing. And ultimately, the takeaway was that it wasn't their place to judge in their theology, and that if they are going to do anything, they are supposed to love. So that is basically where they came back. So I completely agree with like using the language that they speak. If the Bible is their weapon, so to say, turn it into more than that. Like, I think it's really going to have to be a journey of their religion more than anything.
Yes, thank you. Anyone else would like to offer any advice or comments?
I just want to say I really loved what everyone said about this. I just really want to emphasize, like what Jessica said about dismantling that weapon. Like, if they really believe in their Christianity as they feel, Jesus loved everyone, no? And I think maybe that's a reaching point to them, like everyone else said. I just question if that's enough of a reaching point.
I also think like I think to close this section off, like um I think one thing that you might want to talk about them with is just like, I mean, if your religion isn't bringing you joy, you know, like if your religion is preventing you from feeling love towards your grandchildren, I don't know, I think you should really question your relationship with that religion. And that's not to say like that religion, like queerness doesn't have a place in religion. I think that's to say like your relationship with the religion, right? Like I think more than first and foremost, religion should bring you peace and joy. So yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of wiggle room in religion, right? I saw my neighbor cutting his grass last Sunday. I didn't come out with him with an axe, right? Because he was working on the Sabbath. So I think there's some wiggle room in those words. All right, is there any other questions that you have for this distinguished, incredibly talented panel? Does anyone else would like to ask the question?
I don't have a question, but I do have something I'd like to kind of say.
Sure, please.
So I've kind of expressed that I'm like a passive gay compared to Tristan's aggressive gay, which I love, by the way. I'm forever using that. Like whenever I get aggressive, that's what it's going to be. But there's multiple ways you can be an activist without being out. I am very well versed at speaking in the third person, especially when it comes to projects in college. No one in my dental hygiene program knows that I'm pansexual, but the themes of my work have always been centered around LGBTQIA. So all of these presentations we have to do to the classmates, you know, I'm doing it on this subject. So I mean, by now they're probably getting it. It's been 2 years, but you know, you can always speak in the third person. If you're not comfortable with putting your neck out there, put your writing out there instead. Put your artwork out there. If you are in a situation where someone's being homophobic and they don't know, or they're being transphobic and they don't know you, you know, don't be afraid to just say, that's not cool. You don't have to explain why. You can just say, that's not cool. And then if they say, what do you mean? Be snappy and say, Google it. Like it's not your job. It's not any of our jobs to necessarily advocate for the community as a whole, especially like if you're not ready to. And there's multiple ways you can do it. Like, I wish I was that aggressive soul who could like have those conversations in person, but I'm a crier, like any emotion. And it's just, it doesn't matter what it is. If I'm not stone faced, I'm crying. And that's not effective for conversation. So that kind of energy doesn't belong in a conversation. You have to come from logic. And when you're all ethos, it doesn't work. But when I write, I am. So if you can find a way for you to kind of be true to yourself, that might help you along your journey and also help you, you know, you don't have to be out there to be helpful. That's to anyone who's listening.
I'm going to just want to ask again if anyone had a question, but I do want to say this statement too. There's a lot of power in being a student, a lot more power than even being a vice president, because you are the reason we're here. And so it's not unreasonable to have requests. It's not unreasonable to send an email saying we would love to have an LGBTQ plus center on campus. It's not unreasonable to say to a dean of a department, I would love for LGBTQ plus more included in the curriculum within this college. I can suggest things sometimes and they're like, oh, I hear sometimes they're like, Susan's not really interested in that. this. But when students say that, and when a lot of students say that argument diminishes, right? And then people call and say, hey, maybe you're right, Robert. I got students emailing me about this or that. So there's a lot of power in that, but it is a power that comes with the responsibility of putting yourself in a position. And that only comes with being comfortable, right? I don't want to push anyone to do anything that they're not comfortable identifying themselves with. But if you are, then those things are great ways to advocate, to do things. Because the more people pushing in more different directions, the more opportunities things change, in my perspective. I just wanted to include that into that concept when Jessica was talking about that. There's any other questions? And we still have another question on our list, but I just wanted to give anybody else in the group that came, they wanted to ask a question or make a statement to the panel. Okay, let me go to my
Can I make a statement?
Please, Alex.
I'm Alex Rowe and I teach mathematics at Northampton. And I just wanted to mention that I agree with a lot of the comments that you guys are making, especially the one about in the curriculum, how we might skip a chapter because of, for whatever reasons. Do speak to the dean and let them know some courses are diversity courses, and therefore there should be some things taught. Also keep in mind that the professor may not be comfortable to talk about that. For instance, I talk about, I teach statistics, so a lot of my statistics are based from all over, and from COVID to how does it represent in the LGBTQ community and or Hispanic, African American. So I bring a lot of different things because I'm comfortable with that. Not everyone is. So I just wanted to keep you, at least know that there may be some limitations on this instructor. I'm not making any excuses, but if they decide to teach this course, there are some things that they need to cover. And if they're not, then make sure you are heard about that.
I think that's a great point, Alex. I think sometimes we have really good intentioned professors who feel like they, because of their nature, they don't feel authentic by having that discussion. And so they feel like, well, I don't want to talk about Black Lives Matter. I'm not a person of color. I don't want to talk about LGBTQ stuff because I'm heterosexual. I don't want to talk about this because I don't want to talk about disabilities because I'm able-bodied. Whatever that situation is, they feel like they're not in a position to have that dialogue. But they should be, and we hope to facilitate that ability to have that dialogue and to do that. Because if I was talking about the Harlem Renaissance as a person who loves history and loves writing and thing, I would talk about James Baldwin and the fact that how he was torn between his identity, right, and who he was, and Langston Hughes and Courtney Cummings and all these other great people who were divided in being this intersectionality, being Black and being closeted, not Baldwin, not closeted, but other ones being closeted and trying to live two different lives. And that, in fact, that you can see that in their writing. They talk, you can see it once you know the story, that's a part of that story. And you're like, oh my God, I can see what he's doing, right? What she's saying, right? She's saying this because of this other part of her, right? And so I think that's very important. Are there any other comments anyone had for being here? And I would like to thank everyone for even being here, right? It's courage to be a panelist. It's courage to even be here to be a part of this discussion. So I appreciate everyone's willingness to be here and have a frank and honest conversation. Is there any other questions from the group? Well, I have one last question on my handy dandy question list. What is your understanding? I'm sorry.
Actually, I have one question. So Tristan and Fran and I do some sessions for the faculty and staff on occasion. And so my question to the panel would be, what would you like us to tell the faculty and staff? What would you like them to know that we could pass along to them?
I think one thing for me that comes to mind, right? I think I understand like I understand that like some professors might not feel comfortable teaching about certain topics given their professionality and whatnot. But I think I would push back a little bit, and that I would say that how do I phrase this? I think I would say for those professors to think about the pain that their students are feeling at taking that class and not seeing themselves represented, right? So I think, and like I understand like positionality like might make you feel uncomfortable teaching something, but I think there's ways to maybe reach out to another faculty member that might relate more to that positionality. Or there are professors like they have resources that they can reach out to try and learn, because if they don't do it and because they feel uncomfortable, then when will it get done is what I would say.
To add on to that, if they don't start doing it, they'll never get comfortable with it. And they're inhibiting their own growth as a professor and as a student, because we never stop learning, even if we're a professor.
Isabel, you had a comment you wanted to say along those lines?
Yes, apparently I keep typing direct messages rather than to everyone, and I'm too lazy to retype it. So this was easier. As somebody who's been in the medical field for quite a long time, and now I've had the opportunity to work for the school district. I mean, I felt about it this way always, but I feel like there is no place in fields like the medical field, and certainly not in education, if you are not willing to be honest and real about humanity and human issues. And it's heartbreaking that anyone even has to feel threatened for being who they are. Nonetheless, even to have conversations like this, and to see so many other things happening right now. So in my opinion, I really don't feel like there is a place for people that cannot find a way to teach about real history, to teach about, the real things that are happening, or the real things that haven't been taken care of. I've lived in 3 different continents, and most of my life I've been here. There was nothing taught about equality or anything like that, whether it was in my middle school or elementary school or my high school. My daughters have never had anything in regards to that. And it's heartbreaking, because there are people that suffer because of it. And most certainly our children are uneducated because of it, as I was to a great degree. So I think I just don't think there's a place for people like that. And perhaps if that's really the way they feel, they need to find a different place. It's like, if you are a religious person and you want to be able to say, let's pray before a test, then those teachers normally have to find a Catholic school to work at, or, a religious institution to teach at, because you can't say that in a regular public school. There's no place for things like that. So I feel very strongly about that. And I know now I love working at the high schools because there's such a great amount of resources, but there isn't enough out there about the fact that nothing that isn't equal for everybody will be tolerated, and it needs to be a black and white message. Like, there can't be really an in between. Thank you.
I'm sorry I didn't read that chat fast enough, Isabel. It's something. I apologize.
No, I sent it to Professor Sonia instead. No, don't worry.
All right, great comments. I've had my fair share of bad history books. Where I come from, the Civil War is called the War of Northern Aggression. The War of Northern Aggression. It is funny. Rebecca, you have your hand up.
Yeah, this is kind of me getting a little aggressive with this. It is 2021, and the fact that people are uncomfortable talking about topics like this, think of how uncomfortable I am when I'm being told that there isn't a community for me, or that this community or this place doesn't accept me because of how I am. That's uncomfortable. You saying, hey, these people exist and this is where you can go for resources, that's not uncomfortable. That's just you not being willing to help. If you don't feel comfortable in the place that you're teaching, or if you don't feel comfortable because of the student body that you're teaching, guess what? You're gonna have them. Stonewall was only 52 years ago. That's nothing. Get comfortable with the fact that we are here, we are queer, and we're going to stick around. And that's simple as that. Learn, because we're all having to learn. Why can't you? It's that simple. And if you still don't feel comfortable, or you think that you don't know enough about it, reach out. Give people resources and say, hey, I'm not the most educated about this. Here's where you can go to learn more about it. It's that easy.
It is.
I
Thank
just
you
want to
so
say
very
I
much.
love you directing people to direct people to resources. You don't personally have to teach, but direct them to somebody who can, because bigots will gladly educate them about how to be bigots.
That is true. Yeah. Yes, Jessica.
Just kind of like my take on that is definitely, like, if they're uncomfortable, they need to explore within themselves why they're uncomfortable. This is something that everyone should be doing this with any kind of subject. If you immediately reject something or don't want to do something, you need to have some introspective event and look at yourself and try to come up with why you feel this way. And a lot of the times it is rooted in some kind of fear. And I think what Rebecca was kind of getting at, if that fear is rooted in homophobia or transphobia, you need to know that about yourself. And then you need to come to the decision if you're going to change, if you're going to educate yourself or not. And that can be a hard conversation to have. And I think if they're uncomfortable, the best thing to do is then kind of walk through why. Is it because they don't feel that they're represented in this group and they can't talk about it? Well, they talk about every other group. So why LGBTQIA? Every other group is mentioned with much more increased frequency, but for some reason, this is still kind of a taboo subject. So I think that is part of it. And then also what they were saying, if you're not going to do it in a classroom, when are you going to do it? Because the classroom is where you're supposed to learn and grow, and that's your safe space. That is a safe space by all definitions of the term that we've been using the past 10 some odd years. Is that this is where you learn and you have these difficult conversations where it is a learning process. You don't have to spit it out perfectly the first time, but you do have to be willing to learn and try. And I think that, as a professor, if I ever were to become that is what I would want to say. If I'm going to talk about Black history as a white person, I am going to say, this is what you were told in public school. This is what actually happened. And just leave it at that. I don't have to, add my take on it. It's not my time for my voice, but that doesn't mean I can't share the information. And I think that can be applied to the LGBTQIA education. They don't have to add their voice, but they can offer the information, offer the resources. And I think professors are kind of used to adding their input on things, and they don't have to in this case, especially if they don't feel comfortable or they're not represented by their subject. They don't need to add their input on it. They just need to provide the facts.
I just wanted to piggyback off that for 1 second. The whole point of being here and being in college and being in school is to be open-minded and learn new things. And how can you, as a professor, create that environment if you yourself are unwilling?
Yeah, these are very important points. I want to take this moment to still talk about the comment form. It's in this chat. If you have not completed it, please do that for this club. They're creating great content like this, and we want to let them know that, so they'll be encouraged to do more great content like this, right? So we want to do that. I want to take this opportunity to give a round of applause to this wonderful panel. Thank everyone for sharing and being open. I also want to thank the wonderful PTK for their openness to do this discussion and so many other discussions. And I'm honored that they selected me. There are a lot of better moderators than me, but I'm happy that I got the call, and I'm happy to be here and to be a part of this process. And to let you know, to all the students here, if there's ever a situation, faculty, staff, or students here, that I could be a benefit, please just shoot me an email. Let me know what I can do to help to be a part of it. But I really appreciate all of you all. Does anyone else have any closing comments or anything they would like to share with everyone before we leave?
I would just like to say thank you so much to everyone for attending. The panelists have put together, like Dr. Robinson was saying, they've put together several panels now, and you don't always see it behind the scenes, but the amount of work and preparation they put into this, it's just awesome. They never come in here unprepared. They research everything. And so I'm really glad you were able to come and join us today and to share all your thoughts, and be a part of our brave space here as we were talking. And I'm just, as one of the advisors, like, I'm just so proud of this group. Like, I really am so proud of this group. They've done such great work.
It's an incredible group.
Thank you, Professor. On behalf of everyone here, I would like to thank you, Dr. Robinson, for moderating this discussion. You've been wonderful to have. And we would also like to thank everyone who shared their experiences with us. It was very enlightening, and I really appreciate you speaking out and having the courage to do so. And I would also like to thank all of my fellow panelists. This was not easy. We did great. Thank you so much. And discussions like these are very important. We need to make sure we are having these discussions so we can continue to step forward and through the barriers that are affecting us in society today, so that we can move on to a better tomorrow for everyone, not just the LGBTQIA community. And as Dr. Robinson mentioned, there is a link in the chat for an end survey. Anyone who has been listening or has participated, if you could please fill that out for us, that would be great. We're going to use the information to gauge how effective this discussion was. And then we're also going to use it in the formation of further discussions later on down the road. But thank you everyone so much for your participation, and have a great night.
Thank you.